Welcome to Midwife Pip Podcast Bitesize, your weekly dose of all things pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and women's health, to help support you towards a better journey. These episodes are snapshots from previous episodes on the podcast to make sure you have all those golden nuggets of information that you need. And remember, if you're feeling like you would benefit from working with me and having more one-to-one support on your journey, drop me a message at midwife_pip on Instagram so we can chat about how I support women at this time in their lives and may be able to help you too. Planning a pregnancy or trying to conceive can come in so many different shapes and sizes. For some, it's a relatively smooth journey, and for others, there can be many twists and turns to navigate. However the path to pregnancy may look for you, exploring ways to optimise your chances of conceiving and to improve the health of your pregnancy and growing baby has huge benefits for all. I'm super excited for this week's guest, leading obstetrician and gynaecologist seen on ITVs this morning as resident fertility expert, Dr Larisa Corda, to talk about her 12-week conception plan. The conception plan is a science-backed, holistic plan to overhaul your health and well-being and to optimise your chances of a successful and healthy pregnancy. And Dr. Larisa has recently published her book, The Conception Plan. So if you're on a trying to conceive journey or planning a baby in your future, make sure you read this expert information.
Though the traditional medical techniques might not have identified some of these causes, almost inevitably, there is always a reason. It's just that we haven't necessarily searched for it. And that reason is often, with the patient. So I think what's really important is to draw attention towards what I would really call empowerment. So bringing that focus back to the self, understanding that actually, the answers lie within us, and it is down to us to try and change some of the trajectories, the medical and health trajectories that, we might find ourselves on. And that actually the basis of so much health and disease can be put down to lots of different aspects. When you look in more detail at someone's life and what's going on for them, in particular, when you look at things, that actually most traditional doctors don't necessarily pay any attention to, which is, what was your relationship like with your parents? What kind of childhood did you have? What sort of situations did you go through in life? What level of trauma did you experience as a result of that? Trauma is such a big thing. And that's what draws me onto the second part of why I wrote this book, which is that the traditional allopathic medical approach, and I think you'll probably agree with this as well, Pip, is that, it's very fragmented. And it is all about, it dissociates the mind from the rest of the body. And, it's very rare that we as traditional doctors really ask very much about people's mental health and emotional health. And yet it's so pivotal and it's so crucial when it comes to finding some of those answers that I've just been talking about. It's really important that we dig deeper, that we try and understand what's going on for a patient, because, the body and mind communicate. And there is no way that if something is going on, below your head, that it isn't connected in some way to what's also going on with the brain and with the mind. And, the mind is a much wider concept than we used to think of. We used to assign the mind only and purely to the brain. But actually, in my book, I argue that the mind is something that, is embodied by every cell of our bodies, because we now have the research and the science to point to the fact that actually our cells are capable of storing memories, conveying really important information, communicating with every single organ in our body. And so it's this, I really think of the body as this finely tuned symphony of all sorts of different messages, whether they're biochemical, whether they're energetic, whether they're hormonal, going on within us. And the whole of us, not just fragmented parts of us. And we need to start looking at people through this multi-systemic holistic approach rather than just purely focusing on, let's say, their reproductive organs if they're struggling to get pregnant, because there's so much more to it than that. And, you know, as I always say, the brain is probably one of the most important reproductive organs that there is. Yet everyone always attributes that to the ovaries and to the womb or testicles. So those are the main reasons, I guess. I felt the need to write something that was quite different and that would contribute to this already, you know, expanding area of a genre and topic, because the struggle to conceive is very real, and so many people suffer with this. It's just not talked about anywhere near enough. You know, 1 in 7 couples, heterosexual couples, struggle to become pregnant, and you know that number's huge, and it's expanding, and it isn't just down to age, because we see this across the board with younger age groups, and I'm sure you've probably come across that as well.
This episode is sponsored by Reading Eggs, a program backed by solid scientific research and designed by experienced educators. Reading Eggs makes learning to read interesting and engaging for kids, with great online reading games and activities. It is proven to boost reading levels in just 15 minutes a day. Nurturing our little ones' learning and development is something I am really passionate about. So I'm excited to share that Reading Eggs offers you a 30-day risk-free trial where you can access 6 award-winning programs. All use a British accent and pronunciations in all of their lessons and activities, so you can be sure that your child is learning letters and words correctly from the very beginning. Your child will also receive over 4,000 ebooks in the Reading Eggs library, as well as over 500 printable worksheets to practice their reading and math skills at home. Check out readingeggs.co.uk now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I absolutely love and really appreciate as a medical professional, the holistic approach that you're taking to conception, and that putting that power back in the hands of that couple and that woman's body. Because I think over the years, probably over the last generation or 2 or maybe even 3, I think generally in the pregnant space or trying to conceive space, we've really lost that a little bit. And we're just starting to have these conversations where we give that empowerment back to the women. And I love that actually you're stripping that back to before you even got pregnant. So we already start that journey with an empowered person, which then leads so beautifully onto those following steps of their journey through pregnancy, through birth, through the postpartum period. So it really sets you up in that place of kind of capability. And I think as women, we've lost that quite a lot. And like you say, become really reliant on, there must be a problem, therefore fix me with a medical route, and giving that over to a practitioner rather than taking some of that in yourself.
Yeah, exactly that. I love what you just said. And it, you know, the two are absolutely interrelated: preconception, conception, and then what happens whilst you're pregnant, during your labor, postnatally. And I'd argue even in the menopause, you know, the preconception period is something we've never, ever paid much attention to. I think at most people regard preconception as taking a bunch of vitamins, right? And
take your folic acid and that's
take your folic acid. That's what everyone's been told. Although really it's folate. We should be methylated folate. We should be taking. That's a whole other conversation. You know, that's what most people come to know and understand about the preconception period. So it's really minimized. It tends to be sidelined in health. And yet, if you look at all the science behind it, it is probably the most pivotal point when it comes to your health, because it sets the stage for everything else that follows that.
For you and your child, right? Like it's not even just for you, it's for the baby's adulthood.
Absolutely. Totally. And exactly that. And that's why it's so important that you pay the necessary dues and attention that are really important at this stage of your life, because it does affect you, and it will absolutely inevitably affect your child. So the conception plan is really about birthing not just a healthy child, but also the healthiest version of yourself from that point on. And I think that's something that most people aren't aware of, and there hasn't been the education around that as well. And, you know, as you point out, most people have been made to feel wholly deficient in themselves. They've learned to rely on so many other things that they've been told to do, which, are often sometimes actually, quite expensive things, which are outsourced. And, sometimes, yes, they can provide some answers and assistance, but actually, as I've said before, that the first point of call should really be with the self. And, patients need to be made to feel that they have a degree of power to change their own life and to change their own health. And like I say, so much science is pointing to this. So we need to be updating these practices to go with it and move away from this fast fix approach, because there's never really a fast fix, is there? It's like a fast fix towards, healing. And actually that just doesn't really happen. It's often this much deeper approach that's needed if you really mean to change the course of your life and your health. But it's totally doable. And once you learn to do it, once you're empowered with certain techniques, which are often incredibly inexpensive, they're just things that you can do from home and in your everyday life, you start to really shift the whole narrative about yourself. And I think that's what's so vital for so many people, and moving on into their pregnancies and afterwards as well, and caring for their children too, and in terms of the parent that they become as well.
Definitely. And I think in terms of conception health, it's one of those things where we end up with we kind of reach out for it when it's too late, or we've already caused, or there's already a problem, rather than having that kind of preventative. I don't know if we've got a listener perhaps in their early 20s that knows at some point in the next decade, they may like to start a family. Actually, that's a really powerful time to start considering your conception health, although it's not in the immediate period, rather than getting to that point where you're actively trying to conceive and it's been a couple of years and then you're problem solving when it feels really time pressured and stressful, because all you want to do is have that positive pregnancy test. So I think it's really useful to think of conception as...
I hope you found that bite-sized episode really insightful. To listen to it in full, go to the description and visit that episode on whatever platform you're listening on. One last thing before you go. As a listener, really help make this podcast successful. I would appreciate if you could subscribe and leave a quick review. Something so little means so much to me and will help so many women's lives.